Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod, episode number 69. Guys, thank you so much for joining us here again today. It was an interesting week because I talked about it before when I've done segments about how I podcast. There's a video up on the channel that details that. But it's interesting because sometimes, there's a steady flow of new things to talk about throughout the week, and then we kind of go from there. Sometimes it's really, really slow, and we just kind of, got to figure out other topics to talk about. And then sometimes it just ebbs and flows. And this week was an ebb and flow kind of week. It was really heavy up front. Of course, we got to talk about Daredevil, Born Again, episode 3, but then some really interesting news comes out a little bit later on in the week as well that I'm excited to talk about. So guys, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod, marching on towards number 100. I can't wait for that. It's going to be exciting. If you are watching and listening or just checking it out on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, let me know in the comments what you think about any of the topics. I really would appreciate that. And I'd love discussing everything with you guys. I try to respond to every single comment. If you're interested or if you are listening on the audio-only platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast, thank you so much. Make sure to leave a rating, and let me know what you think about it on the audio platforms as well. Guys, that will do it for the intro. Let's get into the topics. Alrighty guys, say what you will about The Mandalorian. For those of you who love it, that's awesome. I personally am someone who enjoys parts of it and enjoys the general premise. I don't love The Mandalorian. I would say I like it. But one of the things a lot of us seem to agree on is that Giancarlo Esposito, or Esposito? I don't actually know because I've heard conflicting things. Anyways, Giancarlo, everyone seems to love him. I love him. He's great. He's awesome in everything. He shows up in The Boys, Mandalorian, even Captain America Brave New World I thought he was great in, even though he wasn't in the film for that long. And of course, he plays Moff Gideon in The Mandalorian Season 3. Now, The Mandalorian is not, at least immediately, or maybe ever, returning for a Season 4, and that's all well and good, depending on how it does, right? Maybe it just makes a bunch of movies from this point on. That would be great. But Moff Gideon is a character who died at the end of Mandalorian Season 3, or at least it seemed pretty definitive that he died. Now, Giancarlo Esposito was giving some comments recently, and to be honest with you, they don't really confirm anything because he doesn't seem to have inside knowledge of the situation, and I really wanted to just use this quote to talk about the possibility of Moff Gideon coming back. So let's read this quote out here, and then let's discuss. Let's see what we think about this. So Giancarlo Esposito was giving an interview, and he said this, quote, "There is a big movie coming out," he's talking about The Mandalorian Grogu, "that's focusing on Mando and the child. I can't say it'll be that." And he's referring to his return to Star Wars. He continues, quote, "But I hope to be able to join that franchise again because I think there's more road for Moff Gideon." So really, like I said, this isn't really a breaking news, anything like breaking news, Giancarlo Esposito hints that he's coming back to Star Wars, nothing like that. I think any actor would say something similar as in, oh, I would love to come back to Star Wars. I enjoy my character and I'd love to come back. That's great and all. That's totally fine. Really, what I wanted to focus on in this segment is the last sentence there. But I hope to be able to join that franchise again, okay? Because I think there's more road for Moff Gideon. And the question for me becomes, is there more road for Moff Gideon? Because, look, you can make any character's revival work, honestly, and I'm not advocating to continue to revive characters because, honestly, that just makes their deaths meaningless. Like, let's look at Loki. I think that every time Loki has been revived, it's been great. Let's look at the end of Thor the Dark World to Thor Ragnarok. That was awesome. I love that, his new role in the MCU. Let's look at the end of Avengers Endgame. I thought that was, that was great. And by that I mean his revival from the beginning of Infinity War to the end of Endgame, where he takes off with the Tesseract, and we love now that he's God of Stories Loki or whatever he is, sitting at the end of time. That's great. I think that that's awesome. I'm not advocating that they just continue to revive characters. But I do think that the point is that, sure, in a vacuum, there is a road for almost any character to come back. That's fine. That's well and good. What I really am questioning, though, is this character of Moff Gideon. Have we basically, come to a natural conclusion to this character? Because let's be honest, at the end of Mandalorian Season 3, we got this whole thing of cloning and whatnot. So sure, there is a story way, there is a canon lore way to bring back Moff Gideon because they were exploring cloning and it looks like Snoke and whatnot. So sure, you can bring back Moff Gideon. I'm going to say this, though. I love Moff Gideon. I love Giancarlo Esposito as a character. I don't think Moff Gideon is that interesting as a character. I just said I love Moff Gideon. I meant Giancarlo Esposito. I love Giancarlo Esposito. I think he's great. He's so menacing. He can do so many different things with so many different characters. He's awesome. I don't know what there is to do with Moff Gideon at this point, unless you want to do a whole Kingpin style backstory where, his father was terrible to him and he really grew up resenting the Jedi. And I don't know, maybe Maybe you could make him one of the more sympathetic villains in the Star Wars universe. Maybe you can really build him up to be a true rival to people like Grand Moff Tarkin or whatever. Sure, maybe. But as a character, I feel like we've run the course with Moff Gideon. Din Djarin killed him, or he died at the end of Mandalorian Season 3. And honestly, I don't remember a whole lot of that season because it just wasn't great in my opinion. But sure, I mean, you can bring him back. My point here is that, would it be great to see him again? Sure. Do I think there is any more road to explore with Moff Gideon? I don't think so. Honestly, I don't think so. And that's part of my disappointment with The Mandalorian, is that it was a very episodic, adventure, scene by scene, planet by planet kind of show that it just didn't really develop a lot of its characters. We got hints of who Din Djarin was. We got hints of his relationship in the present to Grogu. Aside from that, though, there wasn't a whole lot of backstory with Din Djarin, right? There wasn't a whole lot of backstory with Moff Gideon. And I think that at the end of the day, I don't know if there's anything left to explore. So maybe this is a controversial thing. And I'd like to pose the question to you guys. Do you think that there is more story to explore with Moff Gideon? I think that his end at the end of Mandalorian Season 3 kind of wrapped up the character in a way that it's like, okay, now we're good. And now let's face a new threat. And whoever that new threat is, if it turns out to be Embo, right? We talked about that a few weeks ago about, Rada the Hutt maybe, or whatever it is. Maybe. It could be. But we'll have to see. Maybe Moff Gideon makes another appearance. Maybe if they really want to dig back into that whole Snoke clone thing that they seem to be going on, maybe he comes back then. Guys, let me know in the comments down below. What do you think about Giancarlo Esposito's comments? And do you think that Moff Gideon will be coming back? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, I've said this before and I will say it again. I think everyone and their mother will be back for Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. I think literally, especially for Secret Wars, I think almost every single character in the MCU's past will be in Secret Wars. And that includes some of the original Avengers as well. We've heard some plot leaks here and there about the fact that maybe Doomsday and maybe Secret Wars are going to be focusing on evil variants, right, of the original Avengers. And that might be true. Who knows, right? Or maybe these characters will just show up as variants. We don't know. There's been a lot of reports that Chris Evans will show up again as Captain America or Captain Hydra or Nomad or some other version of the character. Who knows? We know Robert Downey Jr. is coming back and he'll be coming back as Dr. Doom, but obviously that leaves the door open for him to return as Iron Man as well, some version of Iron Man, I should say. I would love it if they didn't bring back the 616 version of Tony Stark just because I feel like that was very final. That was so moving to me. And even if you bring back a variant, I hope it's not permanent, just maybe to see another version of Iron Man. But, he's coming back, right? And then we have Mark Ruffalo, who I'm sure will be back as Hulk. I'm sure Jeremy Renner will be back as Hawkeye in some kind of capacity, whatever he's able to do at this point. And I'm sure Chris Hemsworth, I'm positive he'll be back for Doomsday and Secret Wars as Thor. That leaves one original Avenger actress, and that is Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow. Now, of course, in Avengers Endgame, other than Tony Stark, right, and Robert Downey Jr. is coming back, she was the only other character of the original 6 who died. She sacrificed her life because, again, Chris Evans is Captain America. He went back in time, so he's alive as far as we know in the MCU. But, he's also out of commission technically, but, you can bring him back and do all the time travel multiverse stuff. But her character is somewhat definitively dead. That version of 616 Natasha Romanoff seems like she is gone. And the speculation has been, well, it seems like, you can bring back some kind of variant. Maybe it's an evil variant, whatever. And, we can talk about the fact that the multiverse is kind of cheapening a lot of these characters' deaths and the actresses, or the actors and actresses' exits from the MCU. And that's fair to say. I think that it's, it really cheapens a lot of things, especially when you now have a random Gamora just running around the sacred timeline and she's not supposed to be there. Why did the TVA grab her? All these different questions. The MCU doesn't really care at this point. I don't know. So anyways, the speculation has been that Scarlett Johansson will be coming back, though. She will be coming back. And that's really been my assumption as well. I've been suspecting that Scarlett Johansson will be making a return to the Avengers in some kind of form, whether or not it's a variant or whatever. I think the 616 version is dead. So Scarlett Johansson was recently giving an interview, and she was asked about the potential of Natasha Romanoff rather, to return to the MCU. And this is what she had to say. Quote, "Natasha is dead. She's dead. She's dead. Okay?" The actress said, continuing the quote, "They just don't want to believe it. They're like, but she could come back." And so then she finishes off the quote by saying, quote, "Look, I think the balance of the entire universe is held in her hand. We're going to have to let it go. She saved the world. Let her have her hero moment." That's totally fair. Natasha made one of the most noble sacrifices in all of the MCU. She really gave up her life for one of the Infinity Stones that brought everyone back, and that's great. That's awesome, right? And I think that her sacrifice was really, it was beautiful. It was noble, right? So that's great and all. Do we believe her? Do we think that because Scarlett Johansson is saying that Natasha won't be coming back, that do we believe that that's actually the case? Here's what I'm going to say. I would be willing to say, more so than other characters, other actresses and actors, that she's telling the truth. Because she's done everything that there is to do in the MCU. It feels like she's gone through every progression of her character and what she's wanted to do in the MCU that she's wanted to do. That seems kind of circular, but for example, she had one of the longest standing character arcs in the entire MCU. She did, she was awesome, right? She was there from 2010 all the way until 2019. Not only that, she was there into 2021 because she finally got her solo film in Black Widow. And that seems like, while Black Widow wasn't really a swan song to Natasha, it really didn't say goodbye to the character in that way. It was still sort of the final moment. Like, I think the one thing she had left to do, Scarlett Johansson, after Black Widow, or after Black Widow died in Avengers Endgame, was to make that solo film, and she did, and she's done. Now, there have been reports that she's executive producing another project, and that might be true. She might be coming back from a behind-the-scenes, behind-the-camera kind of role, maybe, but in terms of her on-screen presence and performance, maybe she really did finish everything she wanted to do, and even if the Russos say, please come back, we'll give you $5 million to shoot 2 scenes, she might not do it. Because, obviously, does she need any more money? She's Scarlett Johansson and she's married to Colin Jost. Does she need any more money? Anyways, do we believe her? Do I believe her? I would say that these comments probably put my meter of, is she going to appear in Doomsday or Secret Wars, a little bit lower. I might have been at something like 75% before, and maybe now I'm at 60%. I still think it's going to happen. Like I said, I think literally everybody is going to show up at some point in Secret Wars. Because Secret Wars is meant to be this big swan song of every single MCU, like Marvel on film's history throughout the past 20, 30 years, right? And whether or not that's successful, we can debate that. I think, though, that Scarlett Johansson will probably come back to film a couple scenes here and there. And I really do believe that this is not the end for her time in the MCU on screen. We'll see. I think these comments dampen the chances a little bit, and I'm not even saying whether I want it to happen or not, because I think her death, like she said, in Endgame was beautiful, but I don't know if I believe her. Guys, what do you make of Scarlett Johansson's comments that Natasha won't be coming back in Doomsday or Secret Wars, or in the future of the MCU? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, let's file this next segment as interesting, under the category of interesting. It's not a rumor, although it could lead to a lot of rumors, and I don't frankly know how to take this in terms of validity, in terms of is it confirming anything or whatnot. So anyone remember the fact that not only was there one shocker in Spider-Man Homecoming, remember there were 2 shockers? Actually, for those of you who remember all the way back to the rumor mill of Spider-Man Homecoming, this was way back, almost 10 years ago now, right? 2015, 2016, 2017, the rumor mill. People were worried. I was worried. Why are there so many villains in this movie? You have Tinkerer, you have Shocker, you have 2 Shockers, you have Vulture. What's going on here? You have Iron Man. Is this movie too much? Turns out, and maybe this is a lesson that we can learn for the upcoming Superman film that has all these other auxiliary characters, that it's not a big deal if the film can balance it really well. Case in point, the 2 Shockers, one died about halfway through, and the other one really didn't do a whole lot in the film. And in terms of Tinkerer, he was just kind of there, just making things, and Iron Man wasn't. So anyways, all that to say is that we can look at a film and we can be like, why are there so many characters? But it just depends on the execution. But anyways, the character of the Shocker, so it went through 2 characters. The mantle went through 2 characters. One got vaporized by Adrian Toomes, and the other one kind of, he got beat in the bus yard in Spider-Man Homecoming outside the school during the end conflict. And so the actor who played him, Bokeem Woodbine, I never really had thought about the fact that he could return, because I guess he didn't die in Spider-Man Homecoming, but, he is definitely a Spider-Man villain that's out there. We've had 2 MCU Spider-Man films that have come after it, and sure, he doesn't really fit in Spider-Man Far From Home because that takes place in Europe, and he doesn't really fit in Spider-Man No Way Home because that's a multiverse film. So I don't know, depending on what Spider-Man 4 could be, sure, maybe he could appear. And he, while promoting, it looks like Apple TV Plus's Government Cheese series, I've never heard of this series before, he had this to say when being interviewed by The Direct. So The Direct says, quote, "Where's the Shocker? Where did you go?" And Bokeem Woodbine says, "That's a very good question. I'm wondering the same, but I get a feeling it might not be the last time you see the Shocker." Okay, so first of all, headlines running around. Bokeem Woodbine hints at Spider-Man 4 return, MCU return. And that's definitely a possibility. I mean, if it is really going to be street level, then, if you're going to have your Daredevil and Kingpin, which is a rumor, I have to say rumor, because there are all these other crazy theories about Null and symbiotes, and then there's the street level version that has been reported and rumored out there. So all sorts of different versions of the story are being reported. So I'm just here to say that, one version of the story is street level for sure. And yeah, I mean, you could see, the Shocker showing back up again. Maybe the Tinkerer is going to be, that character in Daredevil who makes all the suits and stuff like that. I forget his name, but in the original Daredevil series. I mean, sure, maybe the Tinkerer is making armor for these villains and heroes and whatnot. I don't know. Maybe the Shocker shows up again and he's sort of the crossbones of the, Captain America Civil War. He shows up at the very beginning, incites the conflict, and then he's out, right? I don't know. I have a feeling, though, that this is referring to something else entirely. Because I would put this at about 80% that Bokeem Woodbine is not referring to Spider-Man 4, and instead is actually referring to Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man Season 2. I think that, while it could make sense for him to return, I don't know why, versus a series like Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, where MCU cast members are returning to voice some of their roles, including Charlie Cox as Daredevil, right? And you have A-listers, such as Coleman Domingo voicing Norman Osborn. So it's not like, this series is just replacing everybody with. And I'm not saying this as a derogatory thing, a derogatory descriptor, but unknown voice actors, because again, voice actors probably should be unknown for the most part, because they're usually the ones who are trained to be voice actors. That being said, the MCU is not opposed to bringing back the main cast for their voice roles and bringing in bigger actors. And while Bokeem Woodbine is not an A-lister per se, in the same realm as Charlie Cox, Vincent D'Onofrio, Benedict Cumberbatch, who didn't appear in Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, but I think that this is a show where he could definitely slot back in. He doesn't have to play the Shocker again. He can just voice him for a little bit. And also, this is a series that is very bent, very, very convicted on just putting out the entire rogues gallery of Spider-Man. And I think that's a good thing, by the way. If you listen to my spoiler discussions for Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, this is a series that is just really wanting to explore the entire vast landscape of Peter Parker and his, the characters that surround him. We had so many villains in season 1, which is great because they balanced it really well. And I think that in season 2, we're going to get even more. We're going to get Spider-Gwen as well. I would suspect we might get Miles Morales eventually, if that's within the legal rights of the MCU to do that, given their agreement with Sony. And I think Shocker is probably a huge candidate to show up here. Because Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man is going to release next year, I mean, it's probably going to be a yearly kind of show for the next couple of years. I have a feeling Bokeem Woodbine might either have already recorded some lines for Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man Season 2, or is planning on it and has it on schedule. So when he was asked about it, I kind of suspect that he already knows that, and that's why he answered it this way. Because, let's be honest, right? For a character like Bokeem Woodbine, this is not Robert Downey Jr. pre-Doom announcement, and they're like, are you coming back? And Robert Downey Jr. is like, oh, I don't know, maybe. Because, I mean, if they say that, sure, is it a hint that they might be coming back? Yes, but is it confirmation? No, not really. It's sort of the anything's possible. But with smaller characters like this, when they're like, oh, you never know. I mean, what's the reason? What's the incentive for them to say that other than just to kind of be a troll, right? I mean, if he was not going to be in anything in the future and he just didn't know, then the answer is, oh, yeah, I had fun, but no, I don't think so. And that's that. So I have a feeling that that's what's going on here. But guys, let me know in the comments down below, do you think we'll see Bokeem Woodbine's Shocker in Spider-Man 4, or do you think it's going to be what I think it is in the, not the Amazing Spider-Man 2, but Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man Season 2? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, we talked a little bit ago about the fact that John Lithgow had been in talks, and he was very close to signing on to play none other than one of the greatest fantasy characters in all of fiction, Albus Dumbledore. And I said at the time, in a segment, you can go check out the previous segment in a previous episode of the Access Blockbusters pod, but I said at the time that, look, it's a two-sided thing for me, right? Number one, you get good talent. You always try to get the best talent that you can, and John Lithgow is very, very talented. He's also American, which is very interesting that they're going into the American pool of actors and not exclusively looking at British actors. Anyways, all that aside, he is very, very talented. He's one of the most respected actors working today. The other side of that coin is that he's a little bit older. And I don't mean to say that in a morbid kind of way. I just mean to say in an objective way that this Harry Potter series is meant to go on for maybe 10 years, something like that. 7 seasons and maybe 10 years. That seems reasonable. And that honestly seems aggressive. But that's sort of the aim of what they seem to be going for. And John Lithgow, I think right now, is 79. So it's, it's something of a stretch to say that he might be playing Dumbledore at the end of this. Not to say that, again, not to go to the worst possible scenario, but I mean, maybe physically, right? He just isn't able to play Dumbledore with the requirements of that role. And lest you forget that Dumbledore becomes much more active in the later books. So we'll have to see about that. But again, talent is talent is talent. So I think that it's all good from that point of view. And John Lithgow, because this was all reported, and John Lithgow has spilled the beans. He doesn't care. He's like, all those secrets that we're keeping for, from the interviewers and stuff, he doesn't care. He spills, and it sounds like, has officially signed on to play Dumbledore. So this is, he speaking in an interview, and he gave a bunch of quotes about his role in the Harry Potter series. We're going to read them out here, and we'll talk about them on the other side. He says, first of all, quote, "I don't know the Harry Potter canon by heart as 98% of the world's population seems to. It was a huge decision because it involves the next several years of my life. And I'm not young. I mean, this is the last big role I'll probably play." And that was, that's what we were alluding to just now. And, it doesn't erase those things that I was talking about, those, I'm not going to say concerns, but just other mitigating factors for sure. But it is good to see that he's aware of it. And he's like, yeah, this is going to be my last big role. Well, again, we'll talk more about all the quotes holistically at the end of this segment. Then he goes on to say, quote, when he's talking about why he decided to accept this role, quote, "My big question to them being probably the showrunners and the producers, was, what is new about this? Why do more with this canon when it's already been done so well? They just made it all sound very new." Okay, it's very exciting. And the final quote, "As the kids grow older in the books, you learn more and more about Dumbledore, and he becomes so much more surprising, complicated as a character. They've described this to me, and I've got to discover it for myself and make it my own." End quote. Okay, so I think, honestly, right, because we're talking about now, first, the big news that, yes, John Lithgow has confirmed that he is going to be the next Dumbledore. And this is exciting. I think it's exciting, just in a vacuum of get a really good actor, and he's going to do a really good job as playing Dumbledore. That's great. That's awesome. I'm very excited for that. And then, so that's on the surface level. And I think it's encouraging to hear some of the reasons he's giving as to why he decided to take the role. Because he said, I wanted to know, is this going to be something different and something new? Because, look, I think a lot of the things that we're asking ourselves are the things that John Lithgow was asking the showrunners. How is this going to be different? You've already done this before. How do I know that this is going to be something that's, worth my time and not just something that I am going to do for the sake of doing and then, just remake something lazily? He's like, I want this to be different. I want this to be unique. I want this to be special. And in that regard, I think it's very much an encouraging thing that he was convinced, okay, this is going to be my last big role probably, and let's make it something really special. Let's make it something that is unique and different. And so I think that that's interesting. And he's right. He's right in his last quote of saying, Dumbledore is a very interesting, very complicated, surprising character. He's not all good. The backstory that's explored in the Fantastic Beasts movie and in the canonical, lore about Dumbledore, he's a very complicated person, right? And a lot of pain is brought out towards the later end of the book. So I'd be very interested to see how he approaches it and where we go from there. Guys, what do you think about John Lithgow's comments? First of all, confirming that he is going to be playing the next Dumbledore in the Harry Potter TV show reboot, but also the reasons that he gave for wanting to join the TV show in the first place. Let me know in the comments down below. All right, guys, today is a good day. When I'm recording this, and every day afterwards, well, as long as the show actually comes out, is a good day. It is a good day because today marks the day that Ted Lasso Season 4 has been confirmed. Now, I know on this YouTube channel that the vast majority of us, myself included, are primarily interested in talking about comic book movies, superhero movies, some of the more, I'm not going to say prestigious shows, but things like your Severances and the Penguins and Andors, but also your Miss Marvels, Agatha All-Longs, and Andors and Rogue Squadrons and Rogue Ones and all these sorts of things. And it's fun. It's fun to talk about Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, etc., etc. But there are other shows that I just don't get a chance to talk about too much that I love, I adore. In fact, most of my top favorite shows of all time are not shows that we ever really talk about. Some of them are. For example, Stranger Things exists in and around the top 10 of my favorite shows of all time. In fact, probably top 5. A show like Kim's Convenience that I've referenced several times in talking about Simu Liu, because that's where he really got his first big role, is another show that I absolutely love. So that's another great show. Other shows like Sherlock, I really love. We don't really talk about Sherlock. And of course, sitcoms like Friends and a show like Shrinking that I decided, you know what, we got to make an entire other segment about it because I love Shrinking. And I'm watching Severance right now. So there are a lot of great shows. And Ted Lasso exists in that realm where it's a show that, I didn't, review every single episode that came out or whatever. And there just isn't a whole lot of reason to talk about it these days because we thought it was over. But Ted Lasso is one of those shows that just leaves a lasting mark. And I agree with most people that season 3 was the weakest season by far out of the other 3. Doesn't matter. It's Ted Lasso. I've said this before. My philosophy, my mindset with TV shows is that unlike movies, where movies, you're in the room, you're locked in, you're sitting there for 2 hours or hour and a half or 3 hours or whatever, and you're like, okay, let's see how this unfolds. And after it's done, it's done. And you move on, right? But TV shows, I mean, you're not obligated to sit there and watch the rest of the season. The show has to captivate you. And how does it captivate you? Characters. How does it captivate you? Heart. Tension, emotion. And Ted Lasso has all the heart. It has such joy. I think Shrinking, I like Shrinking a little bit more because Shrinking is just, it digs deeper than Ted Lasso, but Ted Lasso has that joy and optimism and brightness that Shrinking has too, but Ted Lasso has it in spades. Anyways, those are my personal thoughts. But Ted Lasso ended season 3, and we all thought, yeah, I mean, it looks like it's the end. If you guys watched the end of Ted Lasso season 3, it just seemed like it was over. And then whispers started to come out. I made a segment a few months ago saying, well, it looks like Ted Lasso might be coming back. And Hannah Waddington and Brendan Hunt and other actors who were from the previous seasons of Ted Lasso looked like they were signing back on. And it is official now. It is official because the last thing that they were waiting for, it seemed like, was Jason Sudeikis, the creator, executive producer, and obviously the star, Ted Lasso himself. It looked like they were waiting for him to come back if he ever was going to, and he did. He did. And this is an official statement. It's not like an offhand interview of him saying, oh yeah, we might come back. This is an official statement. This is about as official can get. This is what the statement says. Quote, as we all continue to live in a world where so many factors have conditioned us rather, to, quote, look before we leap. In season 4, the folks at AFC Richmond learn to leap before they look, discovering that wherever they land, it's exactly where they're meant to be. I don't know how he was able to capture the spirit of Ted Lasso in 3 sentences or whatever it is, but he did. I mean, that's beautiful. It's emotional. It's the joy. It's the optimism that Ted Lasso brings. So I am so excited to talk about the fact that Ted Lasso season 4 is going to happen. It's probably not going to come out for probably a year and a half or so, just depending on how long it takes for them to shoot. I think the articles are now pointing to the fact that it will be, they're going to start casting and they're going to start filming probably, I don't know if it's going to be this year, but hopefully soon. And then we'll get a season 4 hopefully next year. I'm really hoping 2026 we'll see the return of Ted Lasso. But guys, it's rare because I see news that excites me, right? Fantastic Four trailer drops or Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom, and it excites me. But movie news and television news and blockbuster news rarely makes me this happy. I'm really, really happy. So, guys, what do you think about the news that Ted Lasso season 4 is officially confirmed? What do you guys think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, it seems like lately we've been getting a bit more news with this Narnia reboot. And, Narnia is a property, a series of books that, to be honest with you, has kind of fallen by the wayside in terms of notability because I would wager to say that most people growing up today probably would have heard of Lord of the Rings, for example, or other epic fantasy series, and obviously Game of Thrones is the more modern one. But Narnia, I mean, in the 20th century was one of the biggest fantasy franchises in terms of books that there ever was. J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were 2 of the biggest fantasy writers at the time. So, Narnia, and it was something that I grew up reading, and it was something that I grew up watching with those 3 films, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, and The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. So I've been very interested, personally, but I think a lot of other people are also very interested in how Greta Gerwig is going to be handling her Narnia reboot at Netflix. So we've been getting more news about that in recent days, and we've gotten another piece of news that I am kind of interested in, actually, more so for the question of who could this person be playing? And the answer in reality is almost anybody except for maybe the kids, for sure. But I think I have a couple guesses. So Deadline, like I said, one of the more reputable, like I've been saying, one of the more reputable sources in Hollywood, in the movie industry, has broken an exclusive, I think, saying that Daniel Craig, none other than James Bond and Benoit Blanc himself, Daniel Craig has been given an offer for the Chronicles of Narnia reboot. He has not signed, is what this article is saying, but he has been given an offer, which means that they want him to be a part of the cast. Let's read just a little bit of this article. It says, quote, while it's super early in the deal-making process, sources tell Deadline that Narnia and Netflix, and director Greta Gerwig are aiming high for their next piece of casting on their Chronicles of Narnia movie, as Daniel Craig has an offer to join the cast. Sources stress that it is unknown whether Craig will ultimately come on board, but they do add that he does hold the offer. It is also unknown who he would be playing in the film. So first of all, I've been saying this for a while, and I get this from other people, like John Campea says this all the time. You always want to get good talent, right? And talent is talent is talent is talent. And Daniel Craig is obviously very, very talented. So whatever role he is going to be playing, I would trust that it's going to be a good one and that he is going to crush it no matter what he does, because he is a really good actor. I love him so much as Benoit Blanc. He is awesome. So really, that's it. The news is that Daniel Craig has an offer for Narnia. And look, it doesn't mean he's going to take the role, because last time we talked about the fact that Daniel Craig had a quote-unquote offer on the table. It was Sergeant Rock, and he is no longer going to be Sergeant Rock. So who knows? He could drop out. But let's just, for the sake of argument, I want to speculate here on what is that offer. What character could he be playing? And yes, like I said at the beginning of the segment, it could be anybody. For all we know, and this is going deep into Narnia lore, or not really deep, but just for those of you who have read the books or seen the movies and know them well, he could be playing the beavers, like one of the beavers in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. He could be playing anybody. I'm going under the assumption, for now, that the first movie they're going to be making is either Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is what they did last time, because it is really the biggest novel in the franchise, and so I would assume it's probably the one that could lead off to Prince Caspian and do all the other things, because Magician's Nephew is more of a prequel, and Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was written first, I want to say. So they could go that route again, or they could actually start at number 1 and adapt Magician's Nephew, right? And I think that would be also interesting as well, because we haven't seen a live-action adaptation of that. So in that light, I'm looking at those two stories and trying to figure out what two characters, or what are the characters that he could be playing. And I have a few options here. Let's go to Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I think there's a pretty obvious one here. He could be filling the shoes of the great Liam Neeson and be voicing Aslan. It's something that I wouldn't have considered before, because I just don't associate him with one of the iconic voices. Liam Neeson has just an iconic voice, right? He embodies that. Him and James Earl Jones voicing just two iconic lions in cinema history. Anyways, with their voices. But Daniel Craig, I think, could do it. I think he can transform his voice. We saw that with Benoit Blanc. He could probably channel a deeper, his voice is deep, but like a much deeper level to voice Aslan. That could be very possible. He could be playing Aslan. And I definitely wouldn't be opposed to it. I think it would be a very interesting role. In terms of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, there are all sorts of side characters he could be playing. I think, for me, that's probably, I would circle around Aslan for that one. But I think Magician's Nephew actually offers up a little bit more intrigue here, because I think, wouldn't it be interesting if Daniel Craig, and again, this is going pretty deep into Narnia lore, so for those of you who know, what if he is playing the magician, the uncle to Diggory? I think that could be really interesting as well, because the uncle is a scoundrel. He's not a good person at all. And I think that could be a very interesting role for Daniel Craig to embody. I think he could definitely do it. And so I would be very interested to see him play that role. He could also be playing, I believe his name is Frank, I want to say, the first king of Narnia in that movie. Just kind of an unassuming guy who ends up being the first king in the New World. I think that would be very interesting. So I think The Magician's Nephew, to me, offers some more interesting possibilities of who Daniel Craig could possibly be playing. Again, at the end of the day, it's all just speculation. He may not even take the role, but I still think it'd be a fun thing to see him in the Narnia universe. What do you guys think of Daniel Craig apparently having an offer to join the Chronicles of Narnia? Let me know in the comments down below. Alright guys, let's talk Eternals. Let's talk everybody's favorite MCU movie, Eternals. Okay, all kidding aside, I'm being facetious, but this is a movie that frankly, I know that every single person has a movie or series of movies or television shows where it goes both ways, right? They love the movie and they just don't understand why other people don't like it. Or they hate the movie and they don't understand how people like it. And that's okay in itself. It's not okay if you try to then presuppose and push your opinion on these films onto other people. That's not okay. But if it's just a matter of I just don't get it, then that's totally fine. We all have those movies, right? We all have those things where we just can't understand why. I have a lot of movies where I don't like them and I understand why people do, and vice versa, but there are some that fall into the former category. Eternals is one of them. Eternals is a film that was critically panned. It was not panned. Not liked. 43%, I think, on Rotten Tomatoes or something like that. And I just don't get it. I have a lot of friends who don't like this movie. And that's totally fine. Totally fine, like I said. I don't understand. Eternals is a movie that is very near the top 10 of my MCU rankings. It is a movie that I respect very much. I enjoy very much. I enjoy that it deals with deeper themes. I enjoy the conflicts. I enjoy the characters. And I just, frankly, I think this is an MCU movie that is worthy of the quality of the former movies. And I don't understand. I really don't. All that aside, Eternals 2. Eternals 2 doesn't care about my opinion about the film. Eternals 2 cares about the box office, and it really cares about the critical success overall. And this movie did not do well critically. It was, in fact, the first rotten movie in the MCU, the first one, and it made barely any money. The money part, perhaps if the movie had something like a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes and everyone loved it, then of course that people would make, you'd make a sequel to it because of one thing, the pandemic. This film came out right at the end of basically the brunt of the pandemic at the end of 2021. And so people were still hesitant to go to the movies. And so you understand why Shang-Chi didn't make as much money as maybe it would have 2 years before. Why Eternals didn't make as much money as it would have if it had come out 2 years before, right? These movies were hampered by the pandemic. The fact of the matter is it didn't make a lot of money and it wasn't critically well received. So Eternals 2 has just been on the back burner. And frankly, we've gotten updates saying, yeah, they won't come back. Or Eternals 2 is probably not happening. And a lot of producers and executive producers are saying this about Eternals 2. Even Kevin Feige, I think, at one point said, yeah, we will probably get a sequel for a long time. And there have been reports and rumors and all that kind of stuff. So anyways, it's also true, though, that even if we don't get an Eternals 2, these characters will likely show up again. Whether or not we like it, and I like it, but I know a lot of other people don't, but they're going to show up again. Because, Marvel, for what it's worth, usually ties up their loose ends. Sometimes it takes 15 years, like from The Incredible Hulk to Captain America Brave New World, but it happens usually. Characters come back and plot lines are fulfilled. So I think Eternals will be back. How soon? I don't know. And Gemma Chan, she's promoting a new movie, I believe, called The Actor. Maybe it's a TV show, where she was asked about, are the Eternals coming back? Because last time we saw the Eternals, a bunch of them were floating up in space being judged by Arishem. And that's a loose plot thread. A bunch of other ones are on the Domo, the ship, and Harry Styles shows up. And he's like, I know where your friends are. Let's go. And so there's a lot of loose threads that are hanging about the Eternals. This is what Gemma Chan had to say with regards to, can she make an MCU return? She says, quote, "You never know. We're often the last people to find out. I don't know. I'm keeping the faith. I feel like there's unfinished business there, and there's more story to tell, but we'll see." So again, this isn't a breaking news segment. This isn't Gemma Chan saying, oh, I just signed a contract for Eternals 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we're making them right now. That's not what we're saying here. Really, the question I want to pose to you guys, and I want to ask myself, is, are we going to see the Eternals again in the MCU? I think the definitive answer is yes, right? Again, I think sometimes it takes a long time, but I think that the Eternals, whether or not they're back in Doomsday or Secret Wars, I think they'll be back in the MCU. I do think we'll take another crack at another story with them, whether or not it's in Eternals 2, or if it's another film that is adjacent to Eternals, maybe Thor 5. There were a lot of rumors that Thor 5 would feature the Eternals, right? I don't know, maybe that's the case. But I just happen to think these are such big dangling plot threads, and eventually they're all, or mostly all, because maybe we don't see Harry Styles again, but we will see, I think, the brunt of the vast majority of the Eternals, because things are getting resolved, right? Tiamat was just finally addressed in Captain America Brave New World. Things, I think, are going to get resolved, and I think that we're going to see the Eternals again. Whether or not we get Eternals 2, which I think is a bigger question, are we ever going to get Eternals 2? I think is up in the air, because honestly, I think that Eternals, the premise of Eternals was so promising, and that's just my personal opinion. I know I'm a little biased because I really enjoy the film, but I think that it has such potential that maybe Kevin Feige looks at it and goes, let's take another crack at it. Maybe we do things a little bit differently. I wouldn't, I would be fine if Chloe Zhao came back. I know a lot of other people wouldn't be, but I think that eventually we'll take another crack at the Eternals. So that's my thought here. Again, Gemma Chan saying that she doesn't know if she's going to come back, but she hopes so. That's not really the news here, but it's really the question of, are we going to get Eternals 2? I don't know. I happen to think yes, but we'll have to see about that. Guys, what do you think about this? Do you think Gemma Chan's comments mean anything? And do you guys think we're going to get Eternals 2? Let me know in the comments down below. All right, guys, so we've been talking about Disney live-action remakes for such a long time now because Disney has been making so many of these live-action remakes. We've gotten, goodness, it's going back to Cinderella. We had Maleficent all the way back, and now we're getting a Snow White, official Snow White remake. We've gotten Jungle Book, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, and then we got a prequel to The Lion King, Mufasa, all these different ones, Aladdin, etc., Mulan. But now comes what could be, may I make such a bold proclamation based on just one little trailer and perhaps, yes, let's face it, one character that's designed to be overly cute so that everyone's going to love this movie? May I make the proclamation that Lilo and Stitch might be the best one yet? Because, guys, the trailer for Lilo and Stitch just came out, and it is adorable. Lilo and Stitch is an animated movie that I'm sure I saw as a young kid. I'm sure I've seen the cartoons. It's been such a long time. I have no recollection of watching it. I have no recollection or memory of any of that. But this trailer, I mean, if this trailer, because sure, it's a kid-oriented movie, but I mean, I didn't expect it actually to start out so sci-fi, so space action heavy, but of course, the selling point of this trailer is Stitch. The selling point of this trailer is the mischievousness and the fact that it's going to be sort of like a Baby Yoda kind of character, except this guy is going to cause all sorts of trouble, and I am here for it. The girl who's playing Lilo as well is adorable. I love that this is just a film about hijinks, and of course, I mean, what we all know, if we're familiar with Lilo and Stitch, even I who hasn't seen Lilo and Stitch in a long time, that it's about family, right? That's really what the calling card of this is. So I'm sure that there are going to be some heartfelt moments in here as well. But like I said, let's not fool ourselves. The calling card of this trailer is Stitch. Disney knows. Disney has gotten so good. And I say Disney, it expands across so many different properties that they have that I don't even know if it's just Disney at this point. But, whoever's running the visual effects at Disney or whoever's overseeing it all, Baby Groot, Baby Yoda, now Stitch. They just know how to make these characters so marketable. That's the cynical side of me. On the other side, so cute and adorable and endearing. That's the less cynical side of me. And they did it again with Stitch. They did it again. It's amazing how they were able to pull it off, because he's so mischievous. He's going to get into so much trouble, but we love him for that. And I don't have a whole lot of insight into the trailer. It's not like we can read too much of a message. I think that the family looks fun. I think, like I said, Lilo and Stitch, that's the titular duo. Their dynamic looks really cute. And of course, Stitch himself is just the cutest thing ever. I love the fact that they keep calling him a blue dog, which is so funny. And I love the fact that he takes off the collar. It's just so cute. And I don't know. I've said this before. I should be more cynical about these things. And yet these trailers are convincing me. Maybe Snow White less so. I don't think the trailer for Snow White is really convincing me. I probably will go see it in a couple of weeks just to see what it's like. And then we'll talk about it on the channel. But, I think that these kinds of trailers, like I said, How to Train Your Dragon, of course, and now Lilo and Stitch, I'm being sold, guys. I don't know what to say. So, guys, what did you think about the first trailer for Lilo and Stitch? Are you excited, or maybe you're not as excited for this? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. So a question that I think we've all been wondering is who in the world is going to show up in Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars? I've been saying for a long time now that I think basically everyone who's appeared in a film or a television show that had Marvel or Marvel Studios or based on Marvel Comics under it, and yeah, I even think there's a chance we might get to see Kraven the Hunter. As crazy as that is to say, Secret Wars, there is just there's no training wheels. We're just going full blast. It's the multiverse. Anything can happen. And we can argue, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? But, I think that that's what's going to happen. But Doomsday, at least, seems like it's going to be a little more contained. And I think in general, there are obviously going to be more central characters to these movies, right? It's going to be still a core team of Avengers, and there might be cameos everywhere. And, all sorts of different multiversal characters showing up here and there. But it's going to be a crazy 2 films. So recently, right, Joe and Anthony Russo, we're talking about something that I think has actually quietly become one of the problems of the MCU, that while I think Kevin Feige getting his control back and getting authority and being able to do quality control on the MCU again, I think it's going to help in general. I think he's going to be able to fix a lot of things. I think this is one thing where we're going to have to wait and see how he handles this. And it's about how we transition Disney Plus TV characters who have never been seen in live action film to the big screen. Because let's be honest, right? For all of us, fans and people who stay up to watch the premiere of Daredevil Born Again exactly the second it comes out, and yes, that's me. I'm one of them, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are as well. There are so many people, there I would say millions of people who go to watch these Avengers films. Millions of people who have never heard of Miss Marvel, who have never heard of Kate Bishop, who have never heard of Moon Knight and Echo, and I don't know, all these other characters that, She-Hulk, right? They've never heard of them. Maybe they might have seen a poster and they would have been like, oh, maybe it's some promotion they're doing, and never thought about it again. And so it's a challenge, right? Because yes, we all love Daredevil. The ratings numbers for Daredevil Born Again, while it was pretty strong for the first episode, it wasn't even the top 1, right? And so if you have Daredevil show up in Avengers Doomsday, there has to be a reason or an explanation as to why. And even further, you don't want to bog down Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars by explaining every single character, because it's going to be terrible, even for those of us who have not seen these characters before, and for those of us who have. It's just not going to work. So the question really became, how are the Russo brothers going to handle the fact that there are all these different characters coming together in these 2 films, and are they going to include Disney Plus characters? In a recent interview, because they've been doing a lot of promoting their movie The Electric State, which, by the way, maybe this is a red flag. It's not doing well critically. It's actually being panned critically, which is not a good sign. Although If you look at the resume, I mean, they did Community, which I love their episodes of Community, the paintball episodes. And then they did Captain America the Winter Soldier, Captain America Civil War, and the Avengers films, Infinity War and Endgame. But pretty much everything they've done after that has really not been met well, which is a little concerning. And The Electric State is just another example of that. So we'll see. Maybe it's just the Marvel sauce. Maybe it's the secret sauce that gets them to really make good quality TV shows, movies. I don't know. But this is what they had to say when asked about are they going to include Disney Plus characters into the MCU or into Infinity War. What am I saying? Not Infinity War. Into Doomsday and Secret Wars. This is what they had to say. Quote, in terms of what we're drawing on for our storytelling, we take the comprehensive view of the MCU. This is the universe we're telling a story within. You can read into that what you like. This was, again, I want to say, in direct response to the idea of Disney Plus characters being in the Avengers films. And on the one hand, this is a no-duh moment, right? You can't, I mean, it seems like you can't have an Avengers film without Miss Marvel, who again was one of the characters who transitioned to the big screen. But you have to remember, it didn't work that well, right? Captain Marvel 2, which Captain Marvel 1, you can hate it, and I don't particularly love the film, it made $1 billion. The Marvels made something like $200 million, right? It really, 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 really fell flat. It was, in fact, the biggest box office bomb that the MCU has ever had. And I don't know if, I mean, the quality of the film, sure, might have something to do with it, but I think that even lesser, quote-unquote, lesser-rated films critically, like Captain America Brave New World or Eternals or Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, did better at the box office. And I think part of the reason why the Marvels fell flat was because you had two characters that nobody had ever seen before. Who's Miss Marvel? Who is Monica Rambeau? Who are these people, right? And so, again, I think it's going to be a balancing act. I'm sure that Miss Marvel's going to show up. I'm sure that Daredevil's going to show up. I'm sure... I don't know about Moon Knight, honestly. She-Hulk, maybe. But I'm sure that a lot of Disney Plus characters, Kate Bishop, we saw the leaked concept art of Wiccan and Speed, right? I'm sure they're going to show up. But how are you going to balance the fact that it's like introducing an entire roster of Avengers characters that nobody has ever seen before? I think this is actually, interestingly and very subtly and sneakily, becoming one of the biggest storylines that I'm going to watch as we head into development of Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars, because I think this is something where, sure, Kevin Feige can do more quality control. He can rework Daredevil Born Again. He can slow down the quantity. But he can't stop the Disney Plus train. They've introduced so many characters that have already transitioned into movies already. I've said already twice. But, have already made the transition. And I don't know. I don't know if it's possible to make a film. I'm sure if anyone can do it, it's the Russos. But to make a film where these TV characters come over and it makes sense. We'll have to see. But I'm going to be watching out for this. Guys, what do you think about this comment that basically confirms, yeah, the Disney Plus characters are going to be coming to the Avengers films, Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, every once in a while on the YouTube channel, on the podcast, we got to do a Scarlet Witch update because the question has been, and the question will continue to be, probably until it's confirmed in Doomsday or Secret Wars that she is or is not showing up again. And I said this before, I definitely think she's showing up again, though not in the way that a lot of people think. We'll talk about that in just a second. I've talked about this before in previous segments, but we'll reiterate it as it becomes relevant here because Elizabeth Olsen has been making comments again about Scarlet Witch, about Wanda Maximoff. And her comments are increasingly becoming a little bit more positive in terms of a return to the MCU, which is interesting. So I'm going to read out these two quotes here. She was doing an interview with Collider, and this is what she had to say about playing Wanda Maximoff. She said, quote, I do feel very lucky that I've been able to play a character for over 10 years of my life, and I'd love to keep doing more. Okay, pause, hold that for later. Continuing on. But the animation thing, she was asked a question about Marvel Zombies, weirdly enough, because I guess she's going to return, even though how much voice acting? Unless, like, they do a lot with her pre-zombification, but I don't think they will. But anyways, it's a weird question. But anyways, but this animation thing, I feel like it's a parallel world. I don't really know how it interacts with what we do, but I've really enjoyed getting to play her for over 10 years, and I continue to feel lucky that I have the opportunities I did creatively. Second quote. Quote, it's really unusual. It's something that's been incredible. I assume it's how people feel when they get to do a TV show for a long time. To be able to return to a character and continue to move them forward has been so much fun for me, especially because they gave me something like WandaVision to really blow it all up, and from there, Doctor Strange was such a wild and crazy turn. That's for sure. That is for sure. I don't know if it's her diplomatic way of saying, yeah, I mean, I loved WandaVision and Doctor Strange was something, wasn't it? I don't know. I don't think anyone will really ever know, maybe for another 20 years, how she really felt about Doctor Strange 2. I think from the sense I get is that she also had some qualms with it, like maybe Mark Hamill did with Last Jedi. And again, I love Last Jedi, and I really like her turn in Doctor Strange 2, even though the execution was not perfect, right? So anyways, all that aside, it's the actors are professionals, right? Mark Hamill and Elizabeth Olsen are professionals, and they executed the script that they were given, and that's a testament to them whether or not they liked the turn for the character. Anyways, let's get back to the root of this segment. Is Elizabeth Olsen coming back as Scarlet Witch? Well, the reason that I bring this up is because we've heard comments, right? We've heard her saying, yeah, I enjoyed playing her, and yeah, maybe would I come back? Sure. The reason I think this is interesting is it's following a very similar trajectory to another actor. Remember the comments that Robert Downey Jr. made right after Endgame? He was like, I'm done. I love Tony Stark. I love my time in the MCU. It wasn't disparaging at all. It wasn't mean. It wasn't condescending. But he was like, I love my time there. I'm done. I'm not coming back as Tony Stark. And guess what? He hasn't so far. And then, slowly as the years have gone on, and for him it was a little bit different, right? It wasn't returning as Iron Man. Because yes, he might return as a variant of Iron Man in Secret Wars. It's very possible. In fact, I would even think plausible at this point, because he is actually going to be in Doomsday and Secret Wars. So how hard would it be for him to show up as a variant of Iron Man? For sure. But his comments, right? If you've tracked the progression of how he's been talking about the MCU and his return to it in the years since Endgame, it slowly started to get more and more and more positive, to where he was like, at first saying, I don't want to do it. I'm done. I want to move on. And then it was, yeah, I mean, if they come calling, maybe if there's a good idea, sure. And then it was, oh yeah, I'd love to come back. And then it was, Tony Stark is in my DNA, or something like that. And finally, it all culminated in him saying, I'm back. Same, what is it? New mask, same task, right? That's what he said when he announced he was coming back to play Doctor Doom. And the reason I bring this up is because I feel like it's a very parallel track here for Elizabeth Olsen. Because at first, right after Doctor Strange 2, she was like, I'm done. I loved it. I'm done. And then it slowly started to evolve into, yeah, I mean, if the right thing came up, then I don't know, maybe. And then it turned into, I really love my time in the MCU, so you never know. And now it's this, I'd love to come back. Look, I mean, maybe she's just putting things out there. Maybe she's like, yeah, I had a great time. I'd love to come back. But if they don't want me to, then they don't want me to. And I don't know anything. Maybe it's that. Or maybe she knows something. Because there have been a lot of rumors going around that an evil variant of Scarlet Witch, or even the Earth 616 version of Scarlet Witch, is coming back. We saw, actually, I didn't do a segment on this because I just didn't know what else to say other than it exists, is that there was apparently a canonical TVA comic book that came out with Elizabeth Olsen, a version of Elizabeth Olsen's Scarlet Witch in limbo in the TVA. We don't know if it's 616 Scarlet Witch. We don't know. But again, the stars are beginning to align. There have been a lot of rumors that Scarlet Witch is going to be sort of the lieutenant to Doctor Doom in Doomsday and Secret Wars. Definitely possible. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see about that. I think this is following a very similar trajectory to where at the beginning, just following along with Elizabeth Olsen herself, I was like, yeah, I mean, I don't think she's coming back. I think Scarlet Witch is dead. To now, I'm here saying, I still think 616 Scarlet Witch is dead. But as to, can Elizabeth Olsen come back? Oh, sure, she can come back. Will she come back? I would definitely be skewing towards the positive, so we'll have to see about that. We've done segments before about Scarlet Witch movies, and I don't think that's going to happen. I definitely think, though, it's possible for her to come back in a variant role in Doomsday or Secret Wars. And even, yes, it's possible that she comes back as 616 Scarlet Witch. So guys, what do you think about Elizabeth Olsen's comments? Do you believe that she's going to come back for Doomsday and Secret Wars, or do you think, nah, no chance? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, let's continue on with the spoiler discussions for one of the most anticipated MCU shows in recent memory, Daredevil Born Again. This is going to be a full spoiler discussion for episode number 3 of Daredevil Born Again. So if you have not seen the episode, no worries, but just make sure to save this segment, save the podcast, wherever you are listening, save the YouTube video for later, and just come back once you have, or if you don't care about spoilers, welcome. And we are going to be talking, like I said, all things episode 3 and episodes 1 and 2, of course, of Daredevil Born Again. Let's get into it. So guys, I always like to give a little bit of context at the beginning, just so if you are watching this for the first time, if you're new to the channel, then welcome. And I'd like to give some context just for people who have not been up to date with the Daredevil Born Again spoiler reactions. There are only 2 thus far, I suppose. But regardless, I was very excited for Daredevil Born Again, especially after hearing the fact that they really went back to the drawing board and they said, okay, we're going to do this right. You know, they had shot a decent chunk. I wanted to say maybe 6 or 7 episodes worth of the first season, which was originally going to be 18 episodes, which is crazy. But they had originally shot a lot of the first season, and then they went back to the drawing board and they said, no, it's not good enough. And this is around the time when Kevin Feige truly got his authority back. And so there was a whole squabble between, the CEOs of Disney and whatnot. It's a whole thing. You can read about it. There's a great New York Times article that talks about Bob Chapek and Bob Iger. But anyways, we're not here to talk about that. Anyways, so Kevin Feige got his authority back, and he said, we're going to retool Daredevil Born Again. So they really went back to the drawing board. They got a showrunner and everything looked like it was heading back into a better direction. But we all kind of I wondered, how much of the original show did they keep? What did they add? It's clear that they added Foggy and Karen. They added Vanessa Fisk, the original actress who was playing her, because they had originally recast her, which is interesting, and they had recast her to be a new actress in the original version of the show, because the original version of the show was not going to be connected to the Netflix reboot, but this not the Netflix reboot, but the Netflix original show. But now this iteration was going to be directly connected to the Netflix version of the show. So we get into episodes 1 and 2, and it's very clear. I mean, I really enjoyed episodes 1 and 2. Episode 1 is brutal, and I mean, for more reasons than just the physical action, obviously with Foggy dying. I think that the things they were setting up there with Fisk being mayor and whatnot, it was great. I think that all worked super, super well. And then episode 2, while it wasn't my favorite standalone episode, it was certainly really solid, and I think that they were setting up a lot of interesting things. Some things in there I didn't love. I wasn't quite convinced by the whole BB Urich storyline with the handheld footage cameras and whatnot. I don't know if that was my favorite part of it. And I think that, it was just a little bit of a slower episode, but the ending really brought it home. And I'm not one of these people who are like, action, action, action. I need to see Daredevil in his costume all the time, whatever. But if you actually rewatch the original show, right? And I'm actually in the process of rewatching the original show. It's not like, Daredevil is in costume, and even by costume, I mean the quote-unquote, makeshift costume at the beginning of the series. He shows up when he needs to show up. And I think that that's an interesting thing. It's not like they're keeping him hidden. I think Born Again, though, is something interesting that we'll have to keep an eye out, because it's kind of Matt Murdock's re-transformation into Daredevil. So we'll see how long it takes for him to truly get back into the costume. Because the original report said he didn't even get into the costume until episode 4, which, to be fair, as we get into episode 3, you can kind of see how that would happen in a show that's set up as a legal procedural, just like this episode was. However, I do see now that they've retooled it and kind of tied everything back together, that I think I can get what was originally there and what is, a part of this new overarching storyline. I think. We'll have to see about that. So let's get into it. I've taken notes, as always, on the episode, and we'll talk about some of my thoughts, and we'll go through it, and then we'll talk about my overall thoughts at the end of this spoiler discussion. So starting out here, a good sign, because we're starting out here with White Tiger, Hector Ayala, and we're starting with a 40-ish minute episode. So that's a pretty good start here. It was a bit of an odd cut to the title, with Matt saying, "I promise, you're going to see your family again." And then it just cuts to the title intro, and I don't know, it just felt a little bit abrupt, is what I will say. It's hard for me not to separate my own personal thoughts of how much of this opening was part of the original cut of the show that they had originally shot, because there were reports saying that episodes 2 and 3 were the original first episode of Daredevil Born Again, and I can see that. I can see pretty much everything with the legal procedural kind of being related to the first couple episodes, or the first original pilot of Daredevil Born Again, and I can see all the stuff with, his new love interest and the references to Foggy Nelson, all the Vanessa Fisk stuff being added in later, and I think probably even his death was added in a little bit later, and we'll talk about that obviously at the very end of the episode. Anyways, it was a bit of a weird cut. It also makes you wonder, because this show was called Daredevil Born Again from the very beginning, and I was thinking about this as I was watching the title sequence, what that referred to, because before in the original cut of the show, there was no Foggy Nelson, or at least no version of Foggy Nelson that was similar to the one that Eldon Henson played. And so it makes you wonder, was it a similar arc where Daredevil refused to be Daredevil and then he was born again later on, or was it completely different? Because obviously now Born Again is going to refer to when he makes his triumphant return, or maybe even not triumphant return, as Daredevil in Full Vengeance. So we'll have to see about that. Anyways, at the beginning, there's this little thing about there's a little scene here with a truck, and these two guys get killed. And this subplot, I'm not going to lie, didn't fully work for me, because it was just sort of in and out of this episode, and it didn't make a whole lot of sense. It was, I guess, building the tension between Vanessa Fisk and Wilson Fisk here in this show, or in this episode, and I don't know, maybe that's going somewhere. I'm interested in it on a surface level of, okay, we're building up the fact that Vanessa's like, let's do this the old way, let's use the criminal underworld, and Kingpin's like, nope, let's do things the quote-unquote right way, when you know he's not going to do things the right way later on. And so it's an interesting thing. It's such a random scene, though, to open up the episode on after the title sequence, because it just doesn't really connect to anything, but I digress. I'm not super sold on that subplot yet, but we'll have to see where it goes from there. We get another series of handheld footage shots with the street-level camera footage from the BB Urich show. Again, we're starting out here this episode with two things that I'm just not a big fan of in the show as of yet. I'm not to say that the Vanessa Wilson counseling storyline is not going to be interesting. I just don't think that they've built it up enough yet at this point. So I think, because again, you know that, at one point later on in the show, Vanessa Fisk, who is now the criminal kingpin, will come into conflict with Wilson Fisk, the original kingpin. And this whole Adam subplot, which gets brought up again, where she cheated on him with this guy named Adam, is going to obviously show up again as well. So it's just going to bubble up for a while, and I don't know when it's actually going to come to a boiling point. We will see. We also get to see another Punisher symbol on the side of a building, and then we pick up with the White Tiger storyline with Nikki Torres, who is the guy that Daredevil saved at the end of episode 2, is being rescued by Cherry as the star witness of the trial to save Hector Ayala, which I actually, now transitioning to the legal part, because I suspect that the majority of this legal section here was what the original intent of the show was. And I have to say, right, because if the original intention of the show was just to be a legal procedural with Daredevil popping in and out here and there, I understand why they retooled it. Because I don't think the original intent of the show was a bad thing, right? Like, I watched this episode and I go, I see the promise of what this episode is. I see the promise of what this show is, right? The legal procedural in itself is not a bad thing. I think that there were actually a lot of interesting things with the cross-examination, the witnesses, the fact that Nikki Torres lies and kind of ruins the whole case, the fact that Daredevil outs Ayala as White Tiger. All that stuff is actually really interesting. But I also understand that it's a balancing act, right? And just because the original thing is not bad doesn't mean it couldn't be better. And I think that it's working much better in the context of how this episode ends, which we'll get to in just a second. So I think that in a vacuum, if every single episode was sort of its own individual case and we were kind of going on from there, I totally get why Marvel was like, let's kind of retool this and get it back to the original show's kind of tone. And I think that it's for the better. So this episode, I think whatever they retooled, I think it works a lot better in the context of whatever overarching story is going on in this episode, which I think it has to do a lot with vigilantism. And I think that that's a really interesting thing. So Torres, right, he's the star witness and he lies on the stage because the police are so corrupt and everything's corrupt. And I think that that's getting back to what the through line of this show is. And I think that that is a really interesting thing that the show is exploring with vigilantism, yep, and corruption in the government and corruption all over the place. We get back to Wilson, Fisk, and Vanessa doing their couples therapy thing. And, it's interesting because Wilson Fisk seems like he's genuinely trying to go about this the quote-unquote right way, even though he's not a good guy. And so I think that's somewhat interesting, but I'm still, again, every time they cut back to them, I'm still not so sold on this storyline. We get back to the courtroom then after this, and Matt Murdock outs the White Tiger, outs Hector Ayala as the White Tiger, which at first I was like, whoa, that's really hypocritical of you, Matt, because your whole thing was wearing a mask, until I kind of realized that's the point. Matt Murdock is a hypocrite. They kind of call him out. The prosecutor calls him out later on, and he's like, yeah, is there a hypocrite department in your law firm? And I'm like, I guess that's kind of the point. And it kind of goes to show you how jaded Matt is about being Daredevil. Because obviously Daredevil, that's his whole thing. He wears a mask, he hides, and he fights crime, right? So you can kind of get what's going on there. There's a kind of hypocrisy, but I think it's a very intentional one. I don't know if it was conveyed super well because it is so blatant. Like I would have liked for Matt to have kind of maybe a couple flashbacks to him being Daredevil and him kind of be like, should I even be doing this? Do I even feel bad about it? Because it looks like Matt Murdock doesn't even feel bad about it at all. He's just like, nope, this guy's White Tiger. And I'm like, whoa. That's crazy, right? That's kind of crazy, but I don't know. We'll have to see about that. They talk about the magic amulet again. This is another thing that I'm not super thrilled about. Like, did he need a magic amulet? Even comic book origin, I get it, but magic amulet, I don't know. Kind of weird. It kind of reminds me of Moon Knight because the way that Hector talks about the magic amulet, he's like, no, they chose me. And I was like, okay, maybe kind of Moon Knight. I don't know much about the comic book lore, so you guys will have to tell me in the comments about that. But yeah, I mean, as we're going through this episode, I'm like, it's fine, it's legal, procedural, it's okay. We're getting back to couples counseling with Wilson and Vanessa, it's fine. And I get why Marvel was kind of nervous about this, because if every episode was like this, I think fans would have been disappointed, especially with the buildup of Daredevil coming back. And yeah, so I think Marvel made a good choice at the end of the day. And this is only after having seen 3 episodes, so we'll see where it goes from here. The prosecutor then goes on to just bash bash Hector Ayala, and he goes into such graphic detail about how if you get hit by a train, you survive for a while until you explode, which is just such a yikes. It's such a graphic thing. It's crazy, but then Matt Murdock, being Matt Murdock, wins the case, and I love the shot as well before he wins the case, before they find out that he's not guilty, is that Matt Murdock re-enters the courtroom. And it's almost framed like those scenes where in the original seasons he enters the church, right? And he's sitting in a pew behind the father. And I think it's a great shot. If you rewatch the episode right before they rule the verdict, that Matt Murdock re-enters the courtroom and he's just sitting there in the courtroom like it's a pew. And I think that's awesome. It's a really, really great shot. But anyways, yeah. So White Tiger is innocent, or is not guilty. At least he's deemed not guilty. And it's a little quick for me, right? Because it's such a big monumental case that I was like, well, couldn't we have explored that a little bit more? It feels a little bit abrupt, a little bit rushed, but whatever. I mean, I get that they're trying to get through this in the end of the episode. Also love the fact that Wilson is watching Matt in the TV thwart him in the court, which is why then Kingpin is kind of getting back to his old ways, I think, because I don't know, is Kingpin in league with Punisher, or what's going on with all these Punisher symbols? Because the guy comes out of nowhere, so White Tiger suits up, and then Punisher kills him. And so that was the shot. Unfortunately, I think not a lot of us maybe, but some of us who have been following these kinds of things for a while now, saw the behind the scenes video where the guy came out of nowhere and shot White Tiger. I think we all, or those of us who saw that were a bit disappointed to get that spoiled. I was, at least, because I was like, oh, well, so then we know Punisher kills White Tiger. Turns out that maybe it's Punisher. I couldn't tell from that shot. Maybe that's Frank Castle, although, I think that because we see all these Punisher symbols all over the place, it's hard to tell what's going on exactly with these people. Like, is there a cult of personality with Frank, or what exactly is happening with that? It's hard to tell, hard to say. So I think that'll be something that'll pick up later on when we get to see Frank again, and hopefully that'll be in a couple episodes, maybe next episode. Who knows? We'll get to see him. But guys, like I said, I think the legal procedural stuff in this episode was good. I think there was some good stuff in there. Like I said, there are still things in this episode that I'm just not a huge fan of, like the stuff with Wilson and Vanessa. I'm still kind of waiting to see it pick up. The stuff with the niece of Ben Urich, BB Urich, not super into it yet with the handheld camera footage, but we'll have to see how that evolves. But the other stuff, the legal procedural stuff, was pretty good. I wasn't even that mad that Daredevil didn't show up in this episode, because I think it makes sense. They're now kind of, I think Matt and Wilson are kind of eyeing each other from their respective positions, and I think we'll have to see. I think it's just building up that tension. Like I said, though, if this was the original intent of the show, to have this just kind of be every single episode with Daredevil popping in and out of there, I can definitely see why Marvel decided, yeah, let's go a different direction. So I think overall, things ended up in a good way, because you see the through line, right? Because you see how Wilson at the end is like, oh, okay, so this guy, it's a miscarriage of justice, and vigilantes are allowed to roam, and this guy killed a cop, and it's like all these different things are coming together, and you're like, oh, okay. So we see now why Wilson is going to get increasingly more frustrated and angry at vigilantes, if he wasn't already, based on Spider-Man, based on obviously Daredevil and Punisher and whatnot. So we'll have to see how episode 4 goes. I think this episode was setting up a lot of interesting things, and I think that hopefully we get back to not we get back. I think this episode was fine, but maybe we get back to a more heightened level with the next few episodes. So guys, what did you think about episode 3 of Daredevil Born Again? Did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? Did you think it was a little bit boring, or did you think it was still as intense and as gripping as before? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, so we have some more news regarding the long-fabled, because let's be honest, is it ever going to come out? The long-fabled, rumored, in production, not in production, in development, not in development, Rey Skywalker movie. That movie has been, it's been gestating for such a long time. It's gotten new writers, new directors, all that good stuff, and frankly, I don't know. I mean, a lot of things in Lucasfilm I just don't know about in terms of the movies and shows that are going to come out. It's just hard to say, because directors are going, directors are coming, and writers are being fired and hired, so it's all a big mess over there, in terms of the movies at least. And, part of that, and again, I'm not here to just hate on a person. You can go check out my previous segment where I talked about the rumored, or the report at least, that Kathleen Kennedy was going to be retiring, and then she came out and said, no, I'm not retiring, but still left it ambiguous enough to say she might be stepping down from Lucasfilm this year, all that kind of stuff. But I said there, and I'm going to say it again, I'm not here to just hate on a person for their performance in a particular industry or particular field. It's, again, I mean, I can criticize Kathleen Kennedy and the job that she did in terms of Star Wars because we haven't gotten a Star Wars movie in a long time, and it's just the output has been very disappointing. Just like how I can, criticize Kevin Feige to the similar extent, although I think in terms of him, there are some factors that were just out of his control, but I do think that the MCU has been stagnating and the quality control has been dipping. Anyways, all that aside. So we've gotten some quotes here, and it's actually just one very short quote here in light of all of that from Daisy Ridley herself. She spoke to the direct, and she said this, and she had some comments to make about Kathleen Kennedy and her involvement in this new Rey Skywalker movie. So it's a very short quote. We're going to read it, and then we're going to dive into it. Quote, "I believe that she, Kathleen Kennedy, she's very involved. I think there was reporting that was not true. So yeah, very involved." Okay, so let's look at this in a couple ways. First of all, the fact that Daisy Ridley was like, there was some reporting going on that she was not involved, or that was not true, which seems to allude to the fact that Daisy Ridley saw some reports and she thought that they were saying that Kathleen Kennedy was not involved. For the record, I don't think, and from my memory, I don't think the reports were ever saying that Kathleen Kennedy had no involvement in the Rey Skywalker movie. In fact, the interview that Kathleen Kennedy did with with Deadline, I believe, or Variety, she said she's still very much involved currently with the Star Wars projects. And one of the Star Wars projects that's currently in development is the Rey Skywalker movie, right? So I don't think that actually anything in those reports necessarily had indicated that Kathleen Kennedy was not very much involved in the Rey Skywalker movie. And who would know better than the star of the film, Daisy Ridley? So I don't dispute that Daisy Ridley saw something that said Kathleen Kennedy was not involved in the Rey Skywalker movie, or maybe she interpreted the fact that, these reports are saying Kathleen Kennedy is going to step down, therefore she's not going to be involved in Star Wars anymore, etc. And she was like, no, wait a second. Kathleen Kennedy is still very much involved. Now, Daisy Ridley might be alluding to the fact that maybe she knows that Kathleen Kennedy, no matter what her position is still going to be very much involved. Because what is Kathleen Kennedy's primary career? I mean, what was it? It was a producer of movies, right? And based on her comments, you can go check out, again, the segment that we talked about before. Go check out the interview she did with the Hollywood Reporter, Deadline, Variety, I can't remember which one, but go check out the interview she did. She said, even if she steps down from Lucasfilm, she's not retiring, right? Because if she wants to continue to be a film producer, which is what she did for most of her career before Lucasfilm, that is totally her prerogative. In fact, there's a very similar parallel here going on with Marvel, right? With Black Panther, the executive producer of a lot of the films, Nate Moore, who just recently executive produced Captain America Brave New World, and he was a big part of Black Panther Wakanda Forever. He's also going to be a big part of Black Panther 3. And he said, yeah, I'm stepping away from Marvel, but he's still going to be executive producing Black Panther 3. I think the Rey Skywalker movie, even though it's been in some crazy state of development limbo for such a long time, is still in development. And Kathleen Kennedy is still the head of Lucasfilm. So yes, I totally believe that she is very much involved. Does this make me think that Kathleen Kennedy is not going to step down in 2025 from Lucasfilm? No. I actually think that it's still going to happen because, again, if you look at the entire article, if you look at all of her quotes, Kathleen Kennedy says, I'm not retiring, right? She is not retiring this year, and I believe that. I believe she really wants to continue working in the film industry and doing all the work that a producer might do and et cetera, whatever she wants to do for the remainder of her career. That's great. That's awesome. In terms of Lucasfilm, she said that there are plans in place, succession plans in place, and it's just up to her when she wants to go forward with them. I still think within the next year or so, Kathleen Kennedy will be stepping down from Lucasfilm. But at that point, hopefully, unless this Rey Skywalker movie just never comes out, that movie will be far enough along in development that, of course, Kathleen Kennedy will still be involved. And I don't think anything here is really contradictory. So I think that Daisy Ridley, Kathleen Kennedy, the major outlets, they're all kind of circling around the same thing, that yes, Kathleen Kennedy is probably towards the end of her time at Lucasfilm. She's not going to stop producing films. She's not going to stop working. And she is going to be involved in the current development of these Star Wars projects. I don't think any of those things are mutually exclusive in my view. Guys, what do you think of these comments? They're coming directly from the star of the sequel trilogy and the star of the new Rey film, New Jedi Order, which is what it apparently is going to be called. What do you think about Rey's comments? I keep calling it Rey. Daisy Ridley's comments about Kathleen Kennedy. Let me know in the comments down below. Alright guys, so there's this report going around, and while it's not coming from Variety or the Hollywood Reporter or Deadline, the sources that I usually trust to be about as solid can be, this is coming from a source called Puck, and Puck has been breaking some stories recently. I've really honestly never heard of this source before the past few weeks, but it's honestly just to preface this discussion that we're about to have about Warner Brothers, about Superman, and about the pressure that's on this film. I want to put out there that even if the sources that this outlet is claiming to be citing, it all doesn't end up being true, and whatever, this isn't a reliable thing, whatever. I want to say that the things that this source is saying, right, the kinds of things that they're confirming, they're espousing, I think are true regardless of what the source is. Like it's like saying, for example, leaked source says Avengers Endgame is perhaps the culmination of the MCU from the Infinity Saga. It's like, yeah, I mean, sources say that, internally they view Endgame as the end of the Infinity Saga. It's like, of course, sure. Even if that internal source was completely made up and bogus, that's something we all know. And I think this is a similar case. But I want to read out some quotes here because I think that this is very interesting. So basically, this outlet has been citing sources, and it says that there is a lot of pressure within Warner Brothers. And it's interesting because you see Warner Brothers, for example, have huge hits like Barbie, right? But recently, they haven't been doing so well in terms of box office performance. For example, Joker Folie à Deux. There was another report that came out a while ago that said David Zaslav, who is the new, I guess relatively new CEO of Warner Brothers, was furious at how poorly Joker Folie à Deux did at the box office. For comparison, the first Joker made $1 billion, which is insane. I frankly, as somebody who doesn't love Joker, so admittedly, I don't know, I try not to be biased, but maybe a little bit biased. I don't understand how that film made $1 billion, but it did. It did. Joker Folie à Deux, though, which was critically panned, and for me, I thought it was a confusing mess of a film, made only $200 million in comparison. And recently, Mickey 17, which also was a Warner Brothers film, is not doing so well at the box office. And again, Mickey 17, I just did my review of it. I didn't think it was terrible, and I definitely thought that there was a lot of fun stuff in there, but I mean, it has critical appeal. So even the fact that that film is not doing well doesn't bode well for Warner Brothers. So it's really, putting the pressure on. And on top of all that, right, David Zaslav has been very clear. He's been very upfront and almost cutthroat in a certain way. We talked about a long time ago, many episodes ago on the Access Blockbusters pod, about Batgirl's cancellation. And I said at the time, look, it might make financial sense, but it's the messaging. It's the kind of cutthroat way that he's going about it that I don't know, it may not bode well in the future. He's canceled films like Coyote vs. Acme, the Looney Tunes film, and Batgirl. And it's just that kind of mentality, right? So again, it's all sort of building this pressure of we got to deliver quality. And apparently, according to this source, it's putting all the pressure on Superman. It is putting all of the pressure on the upcoming Superman film. This is a quote from that outlet. This is what it says. Quote, an essential element of the stock price is believing that the IP of DC is meaningful. David Zaslav bet big that they can show the world that the DC IP can have real value. Superman is the first movie. That will set the tone. They have a tremendous amount riding on it. So again, like I said before, news, water wet, right? This isn't news, but I think it's interesting that this article and all these other outlets that are pointing to this article and these sources and whatnot are saying what I think is true. It's putting context to a lot of different things that are going on here. It's not just that Superman is a tremendously important film for Warner Brothers just because it's a big comic book movie on one of the most important cinematic figures ever, right? Superman. It's Superman. It's not just that. It's not just that it's launching the DCU, right, for the first time after the, let's face it, guys, the dismal failure of the DCEU to launch itself and the eventual collapse of it. And I don't say that with any joy, by the way. And I wanted to like more of the DCEU. I liked a little bit of it. So again, I think nothing would make me happier than to see the DCEU succeed because I've been saying this before. People in the comments have been like, Marvel's better, DC's better, Marvel sucks, DC sucks. And I'm like, why? What's the point of that? Let's have great movies for both. I love that the Batman is awesome. I love the Batman. And Infinity War is awesome, right? For example. I love that Wonder Woman is awesome. And Thor Ragnarok is awesome, right? So I think it's better when both are succeeding. But it's not just that. It's not just that it's launching a new cinematic universe on top of the failure that was the DCEU. Critically, financially, you name it. And I'm not even talking about my own personal feelings about the films. I want all films to succeed for the most part, with some exceptions for the odd case. But and again, we won't get into that in this segment. But on top of that, the context that's provided here is that it now has basically all of Warner Brothers riding on it. And it's interesting, right? Because, I think that the amount of pressure, Zaslav, for what it's worth, you can say he's made the right financial decisions. You can say all these sorts of different things, and that's totally fine. I think what he's doing, though, is saying, okay, we're putting our chips in, we're going all in, and we're saying Superman can revitalize the DCU. And I've said this before, if Superman is not received super well, no pun intended, it's not that the DCU is dead on arrival, right? Creature Commandos has come out, and I don't think that, Creature Commandos could have sucked, and I think people would have still been like, yeah, but let's wait till Superman. If Superman doesn't do well, and I really hope it does, but if it doesn't do well critically, like if Superman doesn't do well critically, I think the DCU is in a huge hole. But on top of that now, it seems like they're putting the pressure on themselves with the recent failures like Mickey 17. And again, Mickey 17 could still make a lot of money at the box office. So I'm saying quote-unquote failures. But Joker Folie à Deux was a box office failure. And it looks like if Superman doesn't make a lot of money either, it's not going to look good for Warner Brothers. I'm not saying that from a personal point of view. I think if Superman makes $400 million and is received really well, that's fine. I think that's great. But if it really doesn't do well, then it's going to put a lot of pressure on Warner Brothers. So I think this is something, I would file this as something to monitor, and we'll see. We'll just have to see how Superman does. I'm just hoping for a great film, but there are going to be all sorts of ramifications based on what happens with that film. Guys, what do you think of these outlets that are reporting that there is a ton of pressure on the Superman film from inside Warner Brothers that it needs to succeed? Let me know in the comments down below. Alright guys, Spider-Man 4 continues to head straight towards production, and we have some big news to talk about. We all thought, or at least I kind of thought, that if Marvel was going to cast SADIE SINK, it would be as Jean Grey. And that still might be the case, although I think this news here kind of puts a dampener on that. But we'll talk about the possibilities of who SADIE SINK might be playing, because yes, it is all but confirmed. And I say all but confirmed because I have to reiterate here that this is coming from one of the reputable sources in the movie industry. It's coming from Deadline, I believe. And when sources like Hollywood Reporter, Deadline, or Variety break news like this, it is almost always guaranteed to be true, at least at the time, because who knows, SADIE SINK might back out and whatnot. So again, just at the time, right now, it seems like this is the case. And it looks like SADIE SINK is joining the MCU. Not only is she joining the MCU, and it wasn't in the rumored X-Men film, it looks like. It's going to be in Spider-Man 4. Let me read this first paragraph here. This first paragraph, I think, has everything that we need to talk about. And then we'll talk about who SADIE SINK could possibly be playing in Spider-Man 4. So here we go. Quote, with production set to start later this year on the next installment in the Spider-Man franchise, series star Tom Holland looks to have found a new co-star. Co-star is interesting, by the way, because that indicates a substantial role. That's just me. I'm just talking here. Anyways, a new co-star. One who is no, quote, stranger to popular IP. Get it? Because Stranger Things. Anyways, sources tell Deadline that Stranger Things star SADIE SINK is set to join the sequel from Sony Pictures and Marvel Studios. Holland is already set to return as Peter Parker. Marvel and Sony had no comment. So, okay. That's the news. And it's pretty big news, because the question then becomes, immediately, who is she going to play? We know that Zendaya is coming back, or at least it's all but confirmed that Zendaya is coming back, but it looks like she's going to be having a somewhat reduced role. It looks like Euphoria Season 3 is going to be filming later on in this year, so it looks like her role, whatever it is going to be a little bit less than what it would have been otherwise. And that's all well and good. So who is SADIE SINK going to be playing? I saw some articles making some guesses here, and I'll put out a couple theories of my own that honestly aren't maybe more just analyzing the theories that are out there to see how much I buy into them. So number one, let's talk about Jean Grey. Could she be Jean Grey? Yeah, I think so. However, is it likely? I think her being in Spider-Man 4 makes it vastly less likely. I think, introducing a character like Jean Grey in a Spider-Man 4, that could work, right? I mean, we live in a universe where we got a Thor Hulk movie, right? Basically, we got a Doctor Strange Spider-Man movie. Like, these character combinations don't always have to make the most sense, right? For them to be interesting. So I could see it. That would make some sense to me. Sure, why not? Is it likely that you introduce Jean Grey in Spider-Man 4? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, although if it takes place on Battleworld, who even knows what's going to happen at that point? So maybe. I think it's not as likely anymore, though. So there's that. Mary Jane Watson. This one I'm going to rule out entirely. If she wasn't redheaded, guys, we would not be thinking about this at all. And that's for one simple reason. Zendaya basically did the MJ thing already. It would be so ridiculous, in my opinion, if we had MJ, right? MJ, Michelle Jones, but MJ before, and we moved to Mary Jane Watson, the other MJ, the quote-unquote original MJ. That's silly. That's ridiculous. Again, the only reason we're talking about it in that way is because she's redheaded. And yeah, I mean, is it a little interesting that they cast one of the most talented young redheaded actresses? Sure, but you could, any actress could dye their hair red. It doesn't have to be a redheaded actress, I don't think. It doesn't matter. Like, that kind of stuff can totally be redone with hair dye and prosthetics and stuff. So that doesn't matter to me. So the next option that I've been seeing, Gwen Stacy. And yeah, sure, the irony is there. You cast one of the most talented young redheaded actresses out there to dye her hair blonde to be Gwen Stacy. But it's very possible, right? It is very possible if we're looking at a new love interest in the wake of the memory spell, right, in Spider-Man No Way Home, that he doesn't remember, or that Zendaya's MJ doesn't remember him. It's possible that, he looks for another love interest or whatnot. So sure, could she be Gwen Stacy? I think this is probably the most likely out of all of the options thus far. But the other one that's been floated around that's somewhat Spider-Man adjacent is Black Cat. I don't know if I see this one personally, and I don't really have any basis for this other than I don't personally know what I would look for in an actress to play Black Cat. The last time we got a Black Cat, and it wasn't even really Black Cat, was in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 with Felicity Jones, who really wasn't Black Cat. She was more just Felicia. And I don't know, it's definitely possible that SADIE SINK is playing Black Cat. So again, a lot of intrigue here. It looks like, they're using the word co-star, and usually these articles don't use those words lightly. So they usually mean pretty much exactly what they're saying. So I would take this to mean that SADIE SINK is going to have a pretty significant role in the film. What that is, I don't know. Maybe it's going to be his new best friend, new love interest, new superhero, new mutant. I don't even know. But guys, I think this is very exciting news because this is a film, Spider-Man 4, that I am rooting for so hard. I love all 3 Spider-Man films in the MCU, Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home. And I am rooting for this film. And you get good talent. You get good talent in any capacity, and SADIE SINK is a talent. She's a fantastic actress, and I'm on board. Sign me up. So guys, what do you think about the news that SADIE SINK is joining the MCU, officially, unofficially, reportedly, as mystery character? Who do you think she's going to play in Spider-Man 4? Let me know in the comments down below. And guys, that will do it for episode number 69 of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Thank you so much for joining. As always, make sure to subscribe. Give this video a like if you're listening and watching on YouTube. If you're checking it out on the Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Overcast, or the audio platforms, let me know what you think about the audio platforms by giving it a rating. And guys, thank you so much. It means the world to me that you guys decide to take some time out of your days to just check out some thoughts. And I'd love to engage with you guys in the comments of the YouTube videos. So make sure to leave your thoughts down there. That will do it from me, from the Access Blockbusters Pod, and I will see you guys in the next one.